I was married to John Hawley for 50-some years. And John, when he came up before I did. We had gotten married in 1970 after he had refused induction into the U.S. Army because he was a conscientious objector. He would not go to Canada. He wanted to serve his country, but not killing people. The Sunday I met him, was the Sunday before he refused induction the first time, and a group of people from the church went out to lunch and invited me to come along, and I sat next to him, and I thought, well, he's really nice, and I'll write him when he's in prison, because that was the assumption of everybody. Nobody who had refused induction had not gone to prison. Well, John was the first one who was acquitted, but he was required to go 150 miles from where we lived, and I was in graduate school, and we were in Minneapolis, and he was working for a church. So one of our friends said, well, Duluth is like 152 or 156 miles, and so that's how John got to Duluth. And after he'd been working for the community schools, he had the opportunity to take a church at Gloria Dei, or a job at Gloria Dei Lutheran Church. And it was social outreach in the Hillside. And he had not been doing that very long before he began to get to know the other people that were outreach workers, and decided that there really needed to be some coordination of activities. And so 50 years ago, he got a group of people together from 10 churches for dinner, and all of those churches eventually joined CHUM. And so he's always made himself useful wherever he was, and a lot of it has been volunteer activity. The community schools was a program that I think still exists, and it's classes and things, but it was down at Washington Junior, and they used the gym and the swimming pool. And one of the goals was to get the kids in the central neighborhood to be able to swim. And they had the recreational programs, or they had a bus. But then CHUM took over some of the recreational programs and expanded those in the neighborhood. And CHUM worked with the elderly, both in transportation to appointments. Sometimes there was food provided for people they realized weren't being able to eat, and phone calls to decrease some of the loneliness that existed among the elderly. And they also, CHUM did an early study on redlining, which was a problem in the Central Hillside neighborhoods, where people were banned from buying houses in a neighborhood, and so it made it hard for people to get in. But there was not the obvious homelessness that we developed later on. So they didn't deal with that as much, but they were looking at housing and ways of solving some of those problems. I don't think even I had a sense of the breadth of his influence in town. It was, and he had no ego. It wasn't like, he never tooted his own horn. He always said he was the co-founder of CHUM. And I finally figured that out. He considered the other people that helped fund CHUM, or start CHUM, as the co-founders. I never once heard him say he was the founder of CHUM. So that was a little bit about CHUM, and I think mostly the history of John Hawley. But the neighborhood here is just really fascinating. First of all, people said, I didn't think that somebody who was a faculty member should be living here. And when they got the kind of yellow lights, 3rd Street has evidently got some sort of state designation too. And so some grant kept 3rd Street paved, and they put in those kind of yellowish high intensity lights first. And people said, gee, I guess that's a high crime neighborhood. And I said, no, it's not. you know. But anyway, and it wasn't. It's been a fun neighborhood to live in all these years.